Your soulmate needs to talk to you immediately. Something big just happened. Don't skip. Listen carefully. Author's note: this is a fictional, inspirational story written for entertainment and reflection. It does not claim that a real soulmate is trying to contact you or that these events are actually happening. The story encourages healthy communication, emotional growth, forgiveness, and hope. And listen to this. It began on what appeared to be one of the most ordinary mornings imaginable. The first rays of sunlight slipped gently through the curtains. A cool breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers. Birds welcomed the day with cheerful songs. Neighbors greeted one another as they stepped outside. Children laughed while walking toward school. The world moved at its usual pace. Nothing about the morning suggested that it would become unforgettable. Yet some of life's greatest turning points begin without warning. Not with dramatic signs. Not with impossible coincidences. But with one quiet realization that changes the way someone sees everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because the biggest changes in life often begin inside us long before anyone else notices. That morning, your soulmate sat quietly beside a window with a warm cup of coffee. Usually they would scroll through messages, hurry through breakfast, and rush into another busy day. But today felt different. Something inside refused to let them ignore a question that had been growing louder for weeks. Have I truly been honest, with myself and with the people who matter most? The question lingered. They tried to distract themselves. They checked emails, answered messages, made plans, completed small tasks. Yet every quiet moment brought the same question back. It wasn't accusing them. It was inviting them to reflect. Because your heart needs this right now, because honest self-reflection is often the first step toward meaningful change. After breakfast, they decided to take a walk instead of driving. The neighborhood felt peaceful. A florist arranged colorful bouquets outside a small shop. An elderly man carefully swept leaves from his front porch. A little girl proudly showed her mother a drawing she had made. Simple moments. Ordinary moments. Yet somehow each one seemed meaningful. Watching people appreciate life's small blessings reminded them of something they had almost forgotten. Happiness is rarely found in dramatic events. It grows quietly through everyday gratitude. Because your heart needs this right now, because ordinary moments often become life's most treasured memories. As they continued walking, they reached a familiar park. Tall oak trees stretched toward the bright blue sky. Gentle sunlight filtered through the leaves. The peaceful lake reflected soft white clouds. Children laughed while chasing butterflies across the grass. Families gathered for morning picnics. Everything felt calm. Everything invited them to slow down. Finding a quiet wooden bench beneath an old oak tree, they sat down and simply watched the world around them. For the first time in a long while, they weren't trying to solve every problem. They were simply paying attention. Because your heart needs this right now, because slowing down often allows us to notice truths we miss when we're always rushing. Nearby, a grandfather patiently helped his grandson assemble a small wooden birdhouse. The child became frustrated when one piece didn't fit. Instead of taking over, the grandfather smiled warmly. "Try turning it another way," he said. "Sometimes the answer isn't changing the piece, it's changing the way you look at it." Those words stayed with your soulmate. How many situations had they judged too quickly? How many conversations had they misunderstood because they never paused long enough to see another perspective? The thought lingered. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding often begins when we become willing to see things differently. They reached into their bag and pulled out a notebook they had carried for months. Most of its pages were filled with unfinished thoughts. Questions. Dreams. Lessons. Quiet reflections. Today they turned to a fresh page. For several moments they simply stared at the blank paper. Then they slowly began writing. "Something important has changed inside me. I don't want to keep avoiding conversations that matter. I don't want fear to speak louder than honesty anymore. I don't want gratitude to remain unspoken." Reading those words filled them with unexpected emotion. Not sadness. Not regret. Hope. Because for the first time, they realized they still had the opportunity to choose differently. Because your heart needs this right now, because every new day offers another chance to grow into the person you hope to become. The afternoon slowly unfolded. Golden sunlight warmed the walking paths. A gentle breeze rippled across the lake. Nearby, two old friends laughed together over stories from years ago. Watching them reminded your soulmate that meaningful relationships aren't sustained by perfection. They're sustained by patience. By forgiveness. By honesty. By showing up consistently, even when conversations become difficult. That realization felt freeing. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust grows through everyday acts of care, not extraordinary moments alone. Later that afternoon, something happened that caught their attention. A young woman accidentally dropped several books while crossing the park. Before she could bend down, three strangers quietly stopped to help. No one asked who she was. No one expected praise. They simply helped. The entire moment lasted less than a minute. Yet it stayed in your soulmate's heart. Kindness often arrives without announcement. Quietly. Naturally. Without expecting anything in return. They wondered how different the world might feel if more people chose compassion before judgment. Because your heart needs this right now, because simple acts of kindness often leave lasting impressions. As the sun began lowering toward the horizon, the park slowly became quieter. Families packed their picnic baskets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. The breeze became cooler. Golden light reflected across the peaceful lake. Your soulmate remained seated beneath the old oak tree. They looked down at the notebook once more. Then they wrote another sentence. Today I realize the conversation I've been avoiding isn't really with someone else. It's with myself. I've been waiting for perfect timing. But perhaps honesty doesn't require perfect timing. Perhaps it simply requires courage. Those words changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage often begins with one honest conversation, even if it's the one you have with yourself. That evening, they returned home. The room felt peaceful. A small lamp glowed beside the window. Outside, stars slowly appeared across the night sky. They opened the notebook one final time before bed. Across a fresh page they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will stop assuming people know how much they matter. Tomorrow I will express gratitude. Tomorrow I will listen more carefully. Tomorrow I will choose patience over pride. Tomorrow I will let kindness become my first response." Reading those promises brought a quiet smile. Not because tomorrow was guaranteed, but because they had finally decided who they wanted to become. That decision felt bigger than any prediction about the future. Because your heart needs this right now, because the most important conversations are often the ones that inspire us to grow. Before closing the notebook, they reflected on the title of this story. Your soulmate needs to talk to you immediately. Something big just happened. Then they smiled softly. The big thing wasn't a mysterious message. It wasn't a supernatural event. It wasn't an urgent prediction. The biggest thing that happened was a quiet change of heart. Someone chose honesty over fear. Growth over comfort. Compassion over assumption. And that choice became the beginning of a brand new chapter. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars filled the sky. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would come. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would unfold. And for the first time in a long while, they felt ready, not because they knew exactly what tomorrow would bring, but because they had chosen to meet it with kindness, humility, and hope. Don't skip. Listen carefully. Author's note: this is a fictional, inspirational story written for entertainment and reflection. It does not claim that a real soulmate is trying to contact you or predict future events. The story encourages emotional growth, honest communication, forgiveness, and hope. And listen to this. The morning after that quiet realization arrived with an unfamiliar sense of calm. The sunlight slowly stretched across the bedroom floor. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh rain through the open window. Birds greeted another ordinary sunrise. Outside, neighbors exchanged friendly greetings. Children laughed on their way to school. Cars passed by. The world continued exactly as it always had. Yet something inside had shifted forever. For the first time in a long while, your soulmate wasn't trying to run away from uncomfortable feelings. Instead, they had decided to face them honestly. Because your heart needs this right now, because true healing begins when we stop avoiding difficult conversations and start approaching them with courage. As they prepared breakfast, they noticed how quiet the house felt. Usually they would fill every silent moment with music, television, or endless scrolling through their phone. Today they chose something different. Silence. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. But after several minutes, it became peaceful. Inside that quietness, thoughts they had ignored for months slowly surfaced. Memories of conversations. Moments of misunderstanding. Words left unsaid. Acts of kindness they had forgotten to acknowledge. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, they simply observed those memories with compassion. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth begins when we learn from the past without allowing it to control our future. After breakfast, they placed the notebook into their bag and walked toward the familiar park. Morning sunlight shimmered across the peaceful lake. Tall oak trees swayed gently in the breeze. Children laughed while chasing birds across the grass. An elderly couple quietly shared coffee beneath a tree. Everything looked wonderfully ordinary. Yet every ordinary moment seemed filled with quiet wisdom. They found their favorite bench beneath the old oak tree. Taking a deep breath, they opened the notebook once again. Today's page remained blank for several moments. Then they slowly began writing. I've spent too much time waiting for perfect words. Maybe sincerity matters more than perfection. Maybe people don't need flawless conversations. Maybe they simply need honesty. Reading those words brought unexpected relief. Because your heart needs this right now, because honest words spoken with kindness often matter more than perfectly crafted speeches. As the morning continued, they noticed a young father teaching his daughter how to ride a bicycle. She lost her balance. She stumbled. She became discouraged. But each time she looked ready to quit, her father smiled and gently encouraged her. "You're learning," he said. "Don't let one difficult moment convince you that you can't do it." Those simple words stayed with your soulmate. How many meaningful conversations had they avoided because they feared making mistakes? How many opportunities had they missed because they believed everything needed to be perfect before they spoke? They realized something important. Progress matters more than perfection. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage grows every time we choose action instead of fear. Later that afternoon, they wandered through the park's quiet garden. Bright flowers bloomed beside winding stone paths. Butterflies drifted lazily through the warm air. An elderly gardener carefully trimmed roses. Each movement was slow, intentional, patient. Curious, your soulmate stopped to watch. The gardener smiled kindly. "Beautiful gardens aren't created in one afternoon," he said. "They're cared for every single day." Those words felt surprisingly personal. Healthy relationships grow the same way. Trust isn't built overnight. Forgiveness isn't rushed. Communication improves through consistent effort. Kindness becomes stronger when practiced regularly. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships flourish through steady care rather than occasional grand gestures. They continued walking until they reached the edge of the lake. The water reflected soft white clouds drifting across the blue sky. Gentle ripples spread outward each time a breeze touched the surface. Watching the water reminded them of conversations. Every word creates a ripple. Kind words encourage. Patient words calm. Honest words build trust. Harsh words linger far longer than we expect. Silence can also leave ripples. Sometimes what remains unsaid carries as much weight as spoken words. Because your heart needs this right now, because communication shapes the atmosphere of every relationship. The afternoon slowly turned toward evening. Golden sunlight painted the park in warm shades of amber. Families packed picnic baskets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. The peaceful sounds of laughter slowly faded into evening quiet. Your soulmate remained beneath the old oak tree. Opening the notebook again, they wrote another reflection. Today I realize that the conversation I've been waiting for may never arrive unless someone chooses courage first. Perhaps I can be that person. Those words filled them with determination. Not because they expected every conversation to end perfectly, but because they understood that honesty is always worthwhile. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful change often begins when one person chooses courage over hesitation. As sunset filled the sky with shades of gold, orange, and violet, another realization quietly settled into their heart. The dramatic title of this story suggested that something big had happened. At first, they imagined an unexpected message. A surprising discovery. A life-changing announcement. Instead, the biggest event turned out to be something much quieter. A heart that had once been afraid had finally become ready to speak honestly. That quiet transformation mattered more than any dramatic event ever could. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest breakthroughs often happen inside us before they become visible to anyone else. That evening, they returned home. The room felt peaceful. Outside, the first stars slowly appeared across the night sky. They sat beside the window with the notebook resting on their lap. Turning to a fresh page, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will choose courage. Tomorrow I will express gratitude. Tomorrow I will apologize when necessary. Tomorrow I will listen without interrupting. Tomorrow I will protect trust through patience. Tomorrow I will let kindness guide my decisions." Each sentence felt like another step toward becoming the person they truly hope to be. Because your heart needs this right now, because every small decision shapes the future of our relationships. Before closing the notebook, they reflected one final time on the title. Your soulmate needs to talk to you immediately. Something big just happened. They smiled softly. The real, big thing wasn't an urgent message from another person. It was a quiet awakening. Someone finally realized that healthy relationships are built through honesty, humility, empathy, gratitude, and everyday acts of kindness, not through dramatic predictions or perfect timing. That realization became the conversation that truly changed everything. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars quietly filled the sky. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New opportunities would come. New conversations would begin. New lessons would unfold. And for the first time in a very long while, they looked toward tomorrow not with fear, but with hope, gratitude, and the courage to keep growing one ordinary day at a time. Don't skip. Listen carefully. Author's note: this is a fictional, inspirational story created for entertainment and reflection. It does not claim that a real soulmate is trying to contact you or predict future events. It encourages emotional growth, honest communication, forgiveness, gratitude, and hope. And listen to this. Another sunrise quietly arrived. Soft golden light slowly filled the room. A cool breeze carried the scent of rain-soaked earth through the open window. Birds greeted the morning with cheerful songs. The neighborhood slowly came alive. Someone swept leaves from a front porch. A baker opened the doors to a small cafe. Children hurried toward school, laughing as they walked together. Everything seemed wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside, something extraordinary had continued to grow. The fear that had once filled every quiet moment was beginning to disappear. In its place came something stronger. Peace. Not because every problem had been solved. Not because every question had been answered. But because they had finally decided to stop hiding from the truth inside their own heart. Because your heart needs this right now, because real peace begins when honesty replaces fear. After breakfast, they picked up the notebook that had become a faithful companion during this journey. Its pages were no longer filled with uncertainty alone. Now they contained lessons, promises, moments of gratitude, evidence of quiet growth. Running a hand across the cover, they smiled. The notebook had never changed their life by itself. The courage to write honestly had. Because your heart needs this right now, because transformation begins the moment we become honest with ourselves. They walked once again toward the familiar park. Morning sunlight danced across the peaceful lake. The old oak tree stood exactly where it always had, quietly witnessing another ordinary day. Families gathered beneath its branches. Friends greeted one another warmly. Children chased birds across the open field. Everything felt calm. Everything felt welcoming. Finding the familiar wooden bench, they sat down and simply watched the world. There was no hurry. No pressure. Only quiet gratitude. Nearby, an elderly musician played gentle melodies on an old acoustic guitar. Very few people stopped to listen. Yet he smiled with every song. He played with the same joy whether 5 people listened or 50. Curious, your soulmate approached him. "Don't you wish more people would stop?" they asked. The musician smiled kindly. "I learned a long time ago," he replied. "Some of life's most meaningful songs aren't performed for crowds. They're played because they're true." Those simple words settled deeply into their heart. Perhaps honest conversations are the same. We don't speak truth because we're guaranteed the response we hope for. We speak honestly because truth itself has value. Because your heart needs this right now, because sincerity matters even when outcomes remain uncertain. Later that morning, they wandered through a quiet flower garden inside the park. Bright roses bloomed beside winding stone paths. Butterflies floated gently from blossom to blossom. An elderly gardener patiently removed weeds from the soil. He worked carefully. Without rushing. Without frustration. Watching him reminded your soulmate that healthy relationships also require continual care. Misunderstandings occasionally appear like weeds. If ignored, they quietly grow. If gently addressed, they leave room for stronger growth. The lesson felt simple, yet unforgettable. Because your heart needs this right now, because honest communication protects relationships before small problems become larger ones. The afternoon slowly unfolded. Sunlight reflected across the lake like polished glass. A young couple sat nearby sharing lunch. Instead of constantly checking their phones, they laughed together. They listened carefully. They gave each other their complete attention. Watching them reminded your soulmate of something they had almost forgotten. Presence is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another person. Being fully present often speaks louder than perfect words. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships are strengthened through attention as much as affection. Returning to the bench beneath the oak tree, they opened the notebook once again. Today's page remained blank only for a moment. Then they slowly began writing. I no longer want fear to decide when I speak. I no longer want pride to decide when I apologize. I no longer want assumptions to replace conversations. I want courage to guide my relationships. I want kindness to become my first response. Reading those words brought a quiet smile. They weren't dramatic promises. They were daily commitments. The kind that quietly change a person's life over time. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting transformation is built through small choices repeated faithfully. As afternoon drifted toward evening, a little girl nearby tried to fly a colorful kite. Again and again, it fell to the ground. Each time she laughed, picked it up, and tried once more. Her grandmother smiled and quietly said, "The wind hasn't rejected your kite. You're simply learning how to work with it." Those words touched something deep inside. How often had they mistaken life's delays for rejection? Perhaps some seasons weren't meant to stop them. Perhaps they were preparing them. Preparing patience. Preparing wisdom. Preparing resilience. Because your heart needs this right now, because every season teaches something valuable when we remain willing to learn. Golden evening light slowly spread across the park. Families packed their picnic baskets. Joggers finished evening walks. Children waved goodbye to new friends. The peaceful sounds of laughter gradually faded into quiet. Your soulmate remained seated beneath the oak tree. They looked around one final time. Nothing extraordinary had happened. No dramatic announcement. No mysterious visitor. No miraculous sign. Yet somehow this ordinary day had become unforgettable. Because the biggest event wasn't outside. It had happened inside. Their heart had changed. As sunset painted the sky with shades of gold, orange, pink, and violet, they wrote another promise. From this day forward, I will express appreciation while I still have the opportunity. I will choose forgiveness instead of carrying unnecessary burdens. I will listen before assuming. I will encourage more than I criticize. I will protect trust through honesty. And I will never underestimate the power of one sincere conversation. Reading those promises filled them with quiet confidence. Because your heart needs this right now, because our future relationships are shaped by today's decisions. That evening they returned home. The stars slowly appeared beyond the window. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly in their hands. Before closing it for the night, they reflected on the title one more time. Your soulmate needs to talk to you immediately. Something big just happened. Then they smiled. The greatest conversation wasn't about predicting the future. It wasn't about secret messages. It wasn't about mysterious signs. The most important conversation was the one that inspired someone to become more patient, more compassionate, more honest, more grateful, and more willing to love with maturity instead of fear. That was the real turning point. Before turning off the light, they carefully wrote one final paragraph. Today I learned that the greatest conversations are not always the loudest. Sometimes they happen quietly inside the heart. They remind us to forgive while we can, appreciate while we have the chance, speak honestly, listen patiently, and choose kindness every single day. Those choices may seem small, but they become the foundation of every meaningful relationship. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars filled the night sky. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New opportunities would come. New conversations would begin. New lessons would quietly unfold. And this time, they felt ready, not because they knew what tomorrow would bring, but because they had learned that every meaningful future begins with the choices we make today. Don't skip. Listen carefully. Author's note: this is a fictional, inspirational story created for entertainment and personal reflection. It does not claim that a real soulmate is trying to contact you or predict future events. Its purpose is to encourage healthy communication, gratitude, forgiveness, emotional growth, and hope. And listen to this. The final morning arrived more quietly than any of the others. The first light of dawn slowly spilled across the room, painting the walls with soft shades of gold. A cool breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming jasmine. Birds welcomed another ordinary sunrise with cheerful songs. The neighborhood slowly came alive. Someone walked a dog down the sidewalk. A baker opened a small corner shop. Children laughed as they hurried toward school. Everything seemed exactly the same. Yet everything felt different. Because deep inside, something important had finally settled. The questions that once demanded immediate answers had become quiet. The fears that once filled every silent moment had begun to fade. In their place came something far more valuable. Peace. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting peace begins when we stop searching for certainty and start living with honesty, gratitude, and compassion. They stood beside the window holding a warm cup of tea. For several peaceful minutes they watched the sunrise without trying to rush into another busy day. The world seemed slower, calmer, kinder. Not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because they had finally learned to notice beauty that had always been there. The sunlight warming the trees. The sound of birds greeting the morning. Neighbors smiling as they passed each other. Tiny moments that once seemed ordinary now felt extraordinary. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude changes the way we experience everyday life. After breakfast they picked up the notebook that had accompanied them throughout this journey. The cover showed signs of use. Its pages were filled with questions, lessons, promises, and reflections. As they slowly turned each page, they smiled. The first entries had been written by someone searching for answers. The final pages had been written by someone discovering peace. The notebook hadn't predicted the future. It had simply recorded the quiet transformation of a heart. Because your heart needs this right now, because personal growth is often the greatest journey we will ever experience. Later that morning they returned one final time to the familiar park. The old oak tree still stood proudly beside the walking path. Its branches swayed gently in the breeze. Children laughed while chasing butterflies. Friends gathered for coffee. Families enjoyed simple picnics beneath the trees. Nothing extraordinary happened. Yet everything felt meaningful. Because they finally understood that meaningful lives are built through ordinary moments lived with extraordinary kindness. They walked slowly beside the peaceful lake. The water reflected the bright blue sky like polished glass. Small ripples spread across the surface whenever the wind touched it. Watching those ripples reminded them of conversations. Every word creates a ripple. A kind word encourages. A patient word comforts. An honest word builds trust. A grateful word strengthens relationships. Even silence can create ripples. Sometimes choosing to listen is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another person. Because your heart needs this right now, because communication is one of the strongest foundations of every healthy relationship. Nearby, they noticed an elderly woman sitting quietly on a bench feeding birds. A young child approached her with curiosity. "Why do they trust you?" the child asked. The woman smiled gently. "They didn't trust me on the first day," she replied. "I came back again. And again. And again. With kindness." Those simple words touched something deep inside. Trust isn't built through one perfect moment. It's built through consistency. Through honesty. Through patience. Through showing up even when life becomes difficult. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust grows slowly, but it becomes incredibly strong when cared for faithfully. The afternoon slowly passed. Golden sunlight warmed the park. A young father taught his son how to throw a baseball. Each missed catch became another opportunity to learn. Instead of criticizing mistakes, he celebrated effort. Watching them reminded your soulmate that encouragement often changes people more than criticism ever could. People flourish where they feel safe. Where they feel heard. Where they feel appreciated. Because your heart needs this right now, because kindness creates environments where people can grow. They returned to the familiar bench beneath the oak tree and opened the notebook one final time. Only one blank page remained. They rested the pen gently against the paper. Then they slowly began writing. "Today I release everything I cannot control. I release fear. I release unnecessary regret. I release the need to predict tomorrow. Instead, I choose honesty. I choose patience. I choose gratitude. I choose forgiveness. I choose hope. Reading those words brought tears to their eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. Because they realized they no longer needed every answer to move forward. They only needed the courage to keep becoming a kinder person. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage is not knowing exactly what will happen, it's choosing hope anyway. As the afternoon slowly became evening, the park grew quieter. Families packed their blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. The breeze became cooler. The sky slowly transformed into beautiful shades of orange, pink, gold, and violet. Standing beside the lake, they reflected on the title of this story. Your soulmate needs to talk to you immediately. Something big just happened. They smiled softly. The big thing wasn't an urgent message. It wasn't a mysterious sign. It wasn't a supernatural prediction. The biggest thing that happened was something far more meaningful. A heart that had once been afraid finally chose courage. A person who once waited for life to change decided to change themselves first. A quiet decision replaced years of hesitation. That was the true turning point. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest breakthroughs often happen quietly within us before they change the world around us. As darkness gently settled across the sky, they returned home. The room felt peaceful. Outside, countless stars filled the night. They placed the notebook on the table and looked at it for a long moment. Then they wrote one final message across the last page. If I have learned anything from this journey, it is this. Never assume people know how much they matter. Tell them. Never wait for perfect timing to express kindness. Choose kindness today. Never let fear become louder than love. Choose courage. Never stop growing. Because every lesson, every conversation, every act of forgiveness, and every moment of gratitude becomes part of the person you are becoming. They smiled one last time before gently closing the notebook forever. The journey had ended. But a new chapter had quietly begun. Tomorrow remained unwritten. It might bring unexpected opportunities. It might bring familiar faces. It might simply bring another peaceful sunrise. No one could know. Yet one truth remained certain. The future becomes brighter when we fill today with compassion, honesty, humility, gratitude, and hope. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest gift we can give any relationship is becoming the healthiest, kindest version of ourselves. The stars continued shining outside. The room became wonderfully still. And they rested peacefully, knowing that the most important conversation had never been about predicting the future. It had always been about learning to live with an open heart.